today in Rich in Relationship. We're going to talk about how destructive conflict will inhibit growth and prosperity in your partnership and marriage. Most couples do fear what differences of opinion turns into, and that's that destructive dynamic, that destructive conflict that we're talking about. But true prosperity is more than the money. Prosperity actually requires conflict and difference. It actually requires it. Because creativity and anything new comes out of difference resolution. Welcome to another episode of Rich in Relationship. I'm your host, Rich Heller, and today we are talking about why destructive conflict never produces real or lasting prosperity. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, you can be in conflict and you can be fighting and you can be angry and all of those things and definitely experience prosperity of a sort. But honestly, if you are growing your financial wealth, let's just stick with the worldly, materialistic definition of prosperity. If you're growing money, but you're in conflict all the time, you're not connecting with people. And if you're not connecting with people, then you're missing the big picture prosperity, right? It's that thing they're always telling you when you're on your deathbed, you'll never say, I wish I'd made more money. So I'm not saying don't make money. What I'm saying is when we do it through anger, blame, hurt, when we generate destructive, negative energy in ourselves and in others, we can't really be prosperous. That's what we're talking about today. A listener writes in, every time we try and talk about the hard things, it turns into a fight. We start with good intentions, but end up saying things we regret. I want to feel like differences will bring us closer together, not further apart, but somehow it always ends in conflict. And this is a really important distinction the listener has made between differences and conflict, right? We can have differences without getting into conflict. Well, it's possible. Some of you may not have been experiencing that, and that, my friends, is exactly why we're here today talking about this subject. And I actually want to share something a little personal. For years and years, I met, me personally, everything in my relationship with really aggressive energy. One of the reasons why I do this podcast is it's a form of repentance for me. It's a form of reprogramming my own mind while I share with you what's working in my life today. And it's because there was a time in my life where I met everything. The only tool I had was a hammer and everything was a nail, whether it was my marriage, my children, or my work. And I'm here to tell you that though that worked for me, there came a point in my life where I looked around and said, wow, nice house, beautiful wife, great kids. I'm miserable. I got to change this. And there were consequences for that also. There were consequences on my children that they're still working out. There were consequences on my marriage that we're still working out. And so even though it led to having things that the world rewarded me for, it led to emotional bankruptcy is the best way to put it. Was financially prosperous and emotionally bankrupt. All right, so let me tell you about my clients, Brad and Gwen. Brad and Gwen are in business together, and after a tense quarterly review, Gwen brought up concerns about uneven workload. Can you believe that happens in their marriage? And missed deadlines. Brad got defensive, right? Because the best defense is a good offense. Gwen ramped it up because she wasn't going to back down this time. And within minutes, a business discussion turned into a personal attack cycle, a destructive conflict, a destructive dynamic that was shredding their business. They worked together and shredding their home. And this was not new. It happened at work and at home, and money was usually the trigger. But if we're honest, money wasn't actually the cause. Money was symbolic of the rift that they had. They were stuck in a conflict loop or a destructive dynamic that always left them exhausted, feeling disconnected, and worse, After every fight, there was no real resolution. In the beginning of their fights, they had some good makeup sex, but at this point, that wasn't even happening. Gwen said, I'm trying to solve a problem, and suddenly we're rehashing every mistake we've ever made. And Brad said, it feels like no matter what I say, I lose. So I either fight back or I shut down. And I just want to take a moment to identify here, this is only one reaction to differences coming up and in conflict. There are basically 4 recipes for this. Recipe 1 is the one many of us try out at first. Maybe our parents tried it out for us and we're trying to avoid it today. It's where 2 people are in blame. 2 people are in the place of, I'm going to win, you're going to lose. And if one of them wins and the other one loses, they both lose because it's a partnership, as I've said many times on this show. Dynamic 2, one person starts to get activated or reactive or angry or in blame, and the other one runs away. I'm not going to deal with this right now. And they never come back to it either. They just let them deal with their emotions and avoid the conflict altogether. Option 3, one of them gets angry and the other one freezes and just doesn't know what to say. Option 4, one of them gets angry and the other one tries to calm them down just by being nice and saying good things. Or here's option 5, I guess there were 5, not 4. Both people just avoid differences, airing out differences, because they know it's going to end in explosive conflict, and they don't want that. And I want you to know I've done all of these dances. I've done them from every perspective. I've been the aggressive, overbearing jerk. I've been the fawning, please, let's not do this now guy. I've run away. I've frozen. So the good news is, having tried all of these positions on, in terms of not resolving differences, let's say it, tried on open warfare, complete avoidance of difference resolution of any kind, playing dead, fawning, running away. I've tried them all on. I realize that none of this works in the long run. In the short run, it might be a way to evolve a volcanic eruption. But in the long run, if we don't actually air out our differences and find a way to creatively resolve them, our marriage slowly dies the death of 1,000 cuts. Brad and Gwen came to us for help with this problem. We helped them first. They needed to pause. So a pause is not any of the other things I described. A pause means that they're willing to notice when they're activated. And we gave them tools to notice when they're activated and start to look at, all right, how much of my emotional response is about this? And how much of it is maybe a trained response from some other part of my life or earlier in our marriage? We help them to not only pause, but to not make decisions until they were in a place where they felt that they were emotionally stable. So what that looks like is, if one of them starts to feel activated, or if the other one feels like they're reacting to the other one's activation, they would say, hey, I need to take a time out. And we gave them tools for getting that emotion out in the air without having them get it out on each other. Exercise, the help of a professional, the help of a spiritual leader. Then once they reset, we'd have them come back. Maybe part of it would be write out the dispute, write out what you think they were saying, write out what you think you were saying they weren't understanding, because did they ever get you when you're in that space? Almost never. If your partner actually heard you when you're in that space, maybe the thing wouldn't happen, but no, they don't hear you. They don't respect you. They don't understand where you're coming from or where you want to go. So write it all out and then sit down and let's use some tools. And the tools that we gave them are tools you hear about here on Rich in Relationship all the time. I statements, committed listening, and then we have our own unique brand of empathetic listening, which is the ultimate bridge. But even if you can just get to I statements and committed listening, which is out there in the world, and you can go to our website, richinrelationship.com, join our free community, no obligation, no money, don't even hammer you with emails. We send you podcast and blog notifications. Go there and you can get those I statements and that committed listening tools. If you get those things, if you can stop and use those tools, that's 80% of the battle. And the shared agreement on the front end needs to be, we will not engage in destructive conflict, nor will we ignore it when there's a difference. Those are the two things. Well, they did this, and of course, they didn't do it perfectly, but they noticed that those tense moments, tightening jaws, stiff necks, raising volume, body tension, they became less. And as we help them to learn how to use I statements, because sometimes we don't use them the right way. Sometimes what happens is we think we're not activated, we think we're rational, but we're still talking some smack. We help them to work through that. They got to a place where they could resolve things more creatively, where differences didn't become toxic conflict. Differences became a vehicle for slowly moving forward, meandering forward. And honestly, right, in my own experience with this, sometimes it's enough just to say, I don't agree with that. And as long as you're willing to let go of the result you think is best, you're going to not step into that destructive conflict or running away or playing dead or fawning. And inevitably, you're going to be proven right or wrong. I've got a famous story about automobiles with my wife that I like to use, where we had several cars that were older. And I said, honey, you got to have a car that's younger. This is pulling from my own experience as a fleet manager in a business that I had. And she said, no, I don't want to work that hard. And sure enough, one of them died when we were going on vacation. And I never even said, I told you so. I saved that for another difference of opinion, where I said, remember that thing with the cars? Well, this is a lot like that. And she said, oh, right. So how we handle differences, how willing we are to let go of our need to control, our need to be right, or even our need to not be wrong is huge. Most couples don't fear conflict. They fear what conflict, or let me rephrase that. Most couples don't think they fear differences or conflict. Or if you ask the average couple, hey, are you afraid of difference of opinion? They'd be, oh, go, no. But most couples do fear what differences of opinion turns into. And that's that destructive dynamic, that destructive conflict that we're talking about. It's a tone problem. Sometimes it's a communication gap. But really, at its root, it's a failure in having the structures that you need to keep things safe. Safety is predicated on boundaries. Safety is predicated on knowing that things won't go to a certain point. And the problem is that when we love people, sometimes we say things to them that we would hurt somebody else if they said it to us. Why? Maybe it's because we're reliving our childhoods. Why? Maybe it's because we feel safe and we feel like we need to get it out. But for whatever reason, sometimes we say horrible things to the people we love. Sometimes we do horrible things to the people we love. And it doesn't mean we don't love them. It means that we haven't sat down with them and created the boundaries, the structures for safety, the structures for what kind of communication is acceptable, what kind of communication isn't. It's because there's no protocol for taking a deep breath when you start going from 0 to 60. You're just used to going from 0 to 60 and think that's okay. It's not okay. The only time it's okay to go from 0 to 60 is in a real life crisis/emergency. You're on the plane and it's going down, and your kids aren't belted in or they're not in their seat. Oh, even worse, your kids are in the bathroom and the plane is going down. And the steward says to you, the flight attendant says to you, stay in your seat. I have it starts with an F. No, I'm going to go get my kid. You can have me arrested if we survive this, but my kid's not going to be in the bathroom when the plane goes down. You know what I'm talking about? That's when you go from 0 to 60. When there's rules that are set in place that don't make sense for the safety and well-being of your family, that's when you go from 0 to 60. When somebody steps in your house to hurt your family, that's when you go from 0 to 60. But not with somebody you love. Never with somebody you love. And when there's no protocol, when there's no structure, conversations collapse into patterned reactivity. Patterns that you created either with each other or that came from your childhood, or that were maybe you're reliving the patterns of your parents somehow imprinted on you. I don't know what it is. But that stuff, there's no room for that in a loving marriage. And so the law on this is you've got to let go of that stuff. You got to either you have a higher power in your life and you allow that higher power, whatever it may be, to take it from you. And if that's not working for you, you hire a professional who has a technique. We've got a technique for helping people release old trauma, tensions, and emotions. You go somewhere to like, it's like having a bad tooth. If you don't get it taken out, it makes things worse and worse. There is no ignoring old hurts that haven't been processed. You learn the lesson of those old hurts and you come back to your marriage whole and complete. They won't make you whole and complete. That's on you. And true prosperity. Let's talk about true prosperity. We've done some episodes on it, but true prosperity is more than the money, honey. And I can testify to this because I've been there with the nice car and the beautiful house and the beautiful wife, miserable and alone and isolated, disconnected. True prosperity is about connection. Spirituality, forget about religion, spirituality in its most basic form is about feeling connected, connected to your family, connected to your partner, connected to your community, connected to nature. And anything that's bigger than you, that connection will nurture you and uplift you. Now, prosperity actually requires conflict and difference. It actually requires it because creativity and anything new comes out of difference resolution. I'm going to say this for you again because I'm not sure you're hearing what I'm laying down. Look at the greatest cultural leaps that we acknowledge in America. One of the greatest cultural leaps we acknowledge in America is jazz or hip hop. These came out of the tension between African American culture and the overarching culture of America. And from that tension, something new and different emerged. Jazz is uniquely American. By the way, hip hop is uniquely American too. And we never get credit for that. But we've had some upside down differences in this country, and look at some of the beauty that has come out of it. Difference is the root of creating anything new. Your children are the result of you and your wife who have different genetics, different backgrounds, getting together, having a child together, and combining those in a new and different way. And what happens is the qualities that weren't working so well, hopefully, get set aside, and the qualities that are working so well come to the forefront in our children, hopefully. Well, Brad and Gwen did that. They came to us, and when they stopped trying to fix every fight and realized that the fight itself was what was killing them, they started redesigning how they would approach difference. They had a shared pause. They had a code word. Our code word used to be avocado. We don't need it anymore, thank God. But there was a time there where one of us would get wired up, we say avocado. We both go to separate rooms. And then we come back and talk about what I'm feeling in I-Samus. And through committed listening, what feeling and fact are they trying to communicate to me? So I can make sure I'm really hearing them. They can make sure they're really hearing me. They had, Brad and Gwen had, and we also haven't had regular meetings to talk about different areas of life so that we could be proactive in those areas. Being proactive, if you're having money problems, by the way, being proactive, planning ahead, setting aside 10% for the future, setting aside a certain amount for emergencies, maybe giving away 10% to uplift those around you. That's a great exercise for you just emotionally. It sounds like, oh my God, 10%. But there's a reason why so many faiths have 10% as the number. 10% to give back to the world. If we all gave 10% back to the world, the tension in the world itself would come down and we would benefit from that. Investing in the greater good is always good for us. It helps us move from I, me, to we. Regular meetings, though, that's what I was talking about. With containment in place, real problems could be named without collapsing into crisis. And over time, they first, through caring, structured communication, they rebuild trust. And through rebuilding trust, they establish safety. And through establishing safety and rebuilding trust, they became vulnerable and intimate with each other again. And not only did their business start to do better, but guess what? their marriage started doing better as well. So what's the lesson from this? The lesson from this is destructive conflict doesn't mean your relationship is broken. So many people get divorced because they're having destructive conflict and they think the relationship is broken. They think, I don't love this person anymore. But when we're in destructive conflict, how much do we love anything? When people are really in destructive conflict, they have trouble seeing a positive future of any kind because the nature of being in that space, of this hurts, I'm sad, I feel alone, it's their fault. Why won't they stop doing this to me? The nature of being in that victim feeling space is it's almost impossible to project a future that's positive. All you can project is, and if I stay here, this is going to go on forever and ever. And can you tell I've been there? Yes, I've been there. And I know some of you are there, and you don't have to be there. You don't have to be there because the destructive conflict does not mean there's no love. It just means you're in a place where accessing that love feels impossible. So when you start designing what kind of communication that you're going to engage in and what kind you're not, you can begin to shift that. When you can safely talk about all the feelings, and I'm talking to men right now, not just women. Men, when you can talk about, I feel hurt when this situation happens because it reminds me of an old hurt, because I had an expectation that, an unreasonable expectation that, whatever that is. When you can talk about hurt, sadness, feeling alone, and then let it go, you go, and you start to move out of that space. And when you start to hear them and practice committed listening, you connect with them heart-wise, and that's the door opener to rediscovering love. And I want you to know that when we're in that negative space, love is not a feeling. Love is an action. Men in particular, you need to understand love is an action. And women, when you're so mad and upset with him and you say, well, I love him, but I'm not in love with him, that is not a door closer on its own. That's not a deal breaker on its own. Of course you're not in love with him. You're fighting. Who could be in love with someone they're afraid of? Think about it. But when you do what Brad and Gwen did, you design a system of communication for expressing differences that feels safe. And you make agreements that you learn how to keep and build trust. Differences become a tool for growth and rekindling love. Hope you're tracking that. Next episode, we're going to talk about how do we stop the fight without avoiding the truth, right? Remember the five ways of handling difference: conflict, destructive conflict. One is conflict, destructive conflict. The other four are a form of avoidance. And we don't want to avoid. We want the truth. If one of us is hurt, we want to be able to say how we feel hurt in a way that's truthful for us. And we want the other person to at least validate our experience, even if they don't agree with it. They may see the situation very differently than we do. But if they can see the situation through our eyes, they can say, I could see how you see it that way. My view is a little different, but I get it. I get why you feel that way. And I don't ever want you to feel that way because I love you. And I'm saying that to you now. I don't ever want you to feel that way because I love you. Hey, if you like what we're laying down here, like us, subscribe, keep subscribing, keep tuning in as we move through this series on prosperous partnerships. I'm Rich Heller, wishing you an amazing day and a fantastic tomorrow.